Okay, third grade, here is part 3. Part 12. What are they up to down there, Sabrina wondered, as everyone marched through the tunnel. The journey wouldn't have taken long if they were their usual size, but the length of a normal step required dozens. This is as far as I went before, Wendell said, when they reached a place where the tunnels branched off into 2 directions. Which way should we go? Sabrina heard voices arguing in the tunnel to the left. There's someone else down here besides your father, she said. Let's go find out who. The children followed the tunnel to the left, turned a corner, and crept as close as they could to the 2 men arguing in the dark. Sabrina could not make out the other person's face, but Hamlin was one of them for sure. The principal was wringing his hands. I'm telling you again, this has gone too far. No one was supposed to die, Hamlin said. Piper, you worry too much, a creaky voice said. To Sabrina, it sounded like the voice of a man who had been alive 1,000 years without drinking a single sip of water. Tonight we're going to reach our goal. We would have already been there if it weren't for last night. My son was missing, Hamlin cried. What was I supposed to do? Of all people, I understand, the voice crackled. After all, I'm a father too. The difference is that my children understand how important this is, while your child just gets in the way and puts all this at risk. Don't threaten me, the principal growled. My boy isn't going to ruin our plans. Then we understand each other, the voice said. Tonight, we'll push forward, if you can find the time. Hamlin's voice was so angry it was shaking. Don't question my dedication. This was my idea, after all. I'm glad to see that you still remember that. Hamlin spun around and rushed back up the tunnel, narrowly missing stepping on his own son, who had managed to leap out of the way. Are you okay, Dolphine? Asked, taking Wendell's hand in her own. I can't believe it, the boy said. We should go further into the tunnel, Sabrina suggested. We need to know where they are digging to. Everyone agreed, but just then something crawled out from around a corner and stopped the group in its tracks. An enormous brown mouse, as big as a semi-truck, lumbered towards them. The rodent's pink nose and whiskers flicked and twitched as it sniffed at the children. Sabrina knew that their current size, they'd made a great snack for a hungry mouse. Eat the cakes, Sabrina advised, eyeing the mouse. The children unwrapped their cakes and were about to eat them when the mouse barreled forward and knocked Sabrina down. Dolphine screamed, and Puck leapt forward and dragged Sabrina to her feet. Unfortunately, she had dropped her cake right in front of the beast. The mouse spotted it, sniffed it, and with a quick flick of its tongue, ate it. That was a bad thing, wasn't it? Sabrina said sheepishly. Oh, man, said Puck, quickly shoving his little chocolate cake in his mouth. This is going to be awesome. Dolphine and Wendell were already munching their cakes, too, when Puck offered Sabrina his pinky. Hang on, Sabrina, he said, flashing his devilish grin. This is about to get interesting. Sabrina grabbed his pinky finger and held on tight as the first changes affected the mouse's body. It sounded as if someone were blowing up a balloon. A ripple rolled across the mouse's skin, and its eyes widened as its body inflated to 1,000 times. Yet its little legs and head stayed the exact same size, causing a massive body to plop on the ground. This was followed by a loud, squeaky rubber sound as the rodent's feet and legs and hands expanded. The children dashed down the tunnel to avoid the quickly expanding mouse. Puck, meanwhile, was growing in the same awkward manner. His legs got big first, pushing him to his normal size, and sending Sabrina soaring high into the air. When his upper body and hands finally followed, his pinky got thicker. Sabrina held on with all her might. Luckily, Puck was paying attention. He quickly swung her into his shirt pocket, where she clung to the top as Puck's head inflated. Meanwhile, Delphine's head and feet were the first to inflate, and the not-so-little girl hobbled around like a pumpkin that had suddenly sprouted shoes, and was making an escape from the patch. "I don't like this at all," she groaned. No sooner had she complained than her legs sprouted up like overeager corn stalks, followed by her upper body, and lastly, her neck. Wendell experienced the same kind of disturbing growth. "It's all good," the runny-nosed detective announced, checking for all 10 fingers. But what he didn't see was that it wasn't all good. The mouse was also getting bigger and bigger, until it was nearly as wide as the tunnel. And worse, it seemed very angry. Puck grabbed Delphine, and Delphine grabbed Wendell, and they all rushed down the tunnel and up the stairs. When they got to the top, Wendell and Delphine raced across the room to the door and unlocked it, and hurried into the hall. Puck followed close behind, giggling like an idiot. "Do you laugh every time we're in trouble?" Sabrina shouted. The boy looked down into his pocket. "What are you squeaking about?" When he was safely in the hall, Puck slammed the door shut, and the children leaned against the wall on either side to catch their breath. "I don't think we have to worry about him anymore," Puck said. Just then, the door flew off its hinges, slamming against the opposite wall, and fell heavily on the floor. The giant mouse lumbered into the hallway and roared angrily. It was as big as a stuffed buffalo Sabrina had seen at the Natural History Museum. It let out a deafening squeak and licked its giant front teeth. To make matters worse, the dismissal bell rang, and every classroom door opened. The hallway was immediately flooded with a sea of noisy children, eager to get to their next class. The mouse stomped hard, creating a chasm in the shiny floor, and all conversation ended abruptly. "Well, Piglet, you wanted to do the dangerous stuff," Puck laughed as he turned to Wendell. "Be my guest." "Okay, everyone, there's no need to panic. We're professionals, and we know how to handle things like this," Delphine assured the crowd of stunned students. She flashed her shiny badge to the crowd. A teacher fainted to the ground as the mouse let out an ear-shattering squeal and stomped its giant paws on the floor. "Stay calm," the little girl said. It's as afraid of you as you are of it." All at once, every kid in Freepoint Landing Elementary freaked out. They screamed and ran towards every available exit. Some raced into classrooms, barricading the door with desks, and climbed out the windows. Puck peered into his pocket and smiled at Sabrina. "Hang on, I've got a plan," he said, flashing her a grin. He spun around on his heels and transformed into an orange and yellow alley cat. Sabrina found herself clinging to the cat's ear as it charged towards the giant mouse. Once he got up close, Puck the cat hissed aggressively, but the mouse only stared down at him. Suddenly, what Sabrina can only describe as a smile crept across the mouse's face. It leaned its head down to the cat, opened its mouth, and roared angrily. Puck's short, tabby hair was blown back as if he were standing in a heavy wind, and Sabrina nearly fell off his ear. The cat backed away and transformed into a boy again. "It was worth a try," Delphina shouted. Don't worry, Puck said, with Sabrina back inside his shirt pocket. I've got a million more ideas where that one came from. The boy spun around to face the mouse, and his wings popped out his back. Flapping strongly, he soared over the mouse, spun around, and landed on its back. Yee-haw! He cried, grabbing the heel of his feet into the mouse's side. The mouse squealed in pain, lifted itself on two legs, and kicked wildly, causing Puck to bounce around like a rodeo cowboy, and Sabrina to be tossed around mercilessly inside the boy's pocket. The giant mouse slammed into the walls, broke down doors, and put serious dents into a row of lockers. It shattered a trophy case, sending glass, brass track medals, and bowling prizes skittering around the hallway, crashed into a banner announcing the library's bake sale, and ripped it off the wall. Of course, Puck laughed at every effort the mouse made to buck him off. Sabrina suspected he'd ride the beast all day if it didn't get tired first. Puck, cut it out, she shouted, clutching to the top of the pocket, but she knew the boy didn't hear her over the commotion he was making. Delphine rushed across the hallway, avoiding the mouse's wicked flapping tail. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her half-full drink-me juice and aimed it at the mouse's mouth. Delphine, you're a genius, Sabrina said. Delphine reached back like a big league pitcher, waiting for the mouse to open its gasping mouth, and tossed the juice box as hard as she could. Unfortunately, instead of slipping down the mouse's throat, the box bounced off one of the rodent's gnarly yellow teeth and fell to the ground. The mouse stomped down on the box, spraying the contents all over the hallway. What's plan B? Wendell shouted just as the mouse headed for the exit door. Unfortunately, Delphine was right in its path. Run, Delphine, Sabrina yelled, but there was no way the little girl could move that quickly. Luckily, Wendell crossed the hall and pushed Delphine to safety just as the enormous rodent lumbered past them like an out-of-control train. It slammed into the exit doors, knocking them off their hinges, and stomped outside. Puck howled and laughed the whole way until a low-hanging tree with a thick limb knocked him off the mouse. He fell hard on his back, sending his drink-me box flying and launching Sabrina out of his pocket and onto the lawn, several yards away. By the time Sabrina got her bearings, the mouse was already on top of the boy, doing what he could to sink his sharp teeth into him as Puck fought it off. Got any more juice? He shouted, as Delphine and Wendell raced to his side. Puck snatched Wendell's drink-me box with a free hand and squeezed its contents into the mouse's mouth until the box was crumpled and empty. Almost immediately, a ripple ran across the mouse's skin. The rodent shrank rapidly until it was once again a little brown mouse sitting on the boy's chest. Puck looked down at it and laughed. Then he ran his fingers over the mouse's coat. Good try, he told the rodent. You almost had me. Delphine helped Puck to his feet. Where's Sabrina? She asked. Don't worry, Marshmallow. She's right here in my pocket, he said as he looked inside. Uh-oh. What uh-oh? She's not there. The little girl's eyes got as big as saucers. Don't anyone move. She probably fell out here on the lawn and you could step on her. Sabrina, Delphine shouted. I'm here, Sabrina yelled, waving her hands and jumping up and down. But none of the children could see her. What if we've already stepped on her? Her sister cried as tears streamed down her face. Let's check, Wendell said. He slowly lifted each of his shoes. She's not on mine. Puck also looked under his sneakers. All clear. Delphine checked one foot and then the other. A big smile came to her face. See, we haven't stepped on her yet. I think we better get the old lady, Puck said. Best that I fly us out of here so we don't squish her. In a few moments he had snatched the other children off the ground, and they were flying away. Don't you dare leave me out here, Sabrina screamed, but they were gone. She looked around. The school was only steps away for a normal-sized person, but for her it seemed like half a mile. Staying put was probably the best, but the air was freezing, even with her coat on. So she shoved her hands into her pockets and marched towards the entrance to the school. When she finally reached the school's main doors, she found them in a heap, knocked off their hinges by the giant mouse, which left the hallway open to the bitter winter wind outside. Her walk had chilled her to the bone, and finding somewhere safe and warm to rest was now her main priority. She remembered that the heat in Mr. Sheepshank's office was always on full blast. If she was going to get warm, that was the place to go. So she ran down the hall, dodging a giant mound of discarded bubble gum, and made her way to the main office door. She'd hoped it would be a safe place to hide until Puck could return with her grandmother. But as soon as she crawled underneath the door, she knew she had an even bigger problem. There's another roach, the secretary said. She reached into her drawer and pulled out an aerosol spray can, shook it vigorously, and got up from her desk. One glance at the can told Sabrina all she needed to know about what was going to happen next. It didn't take a rocket scientist to know what roach be dead meant. She ran along the rug frantically, racing under the secretary's desk, just as the gigantic woman rounded the other side. This was unbelievable. A giant mouse had just been rampaging through the school, and these goofy secretaries worried about roaches. When Sabrina came into the light, the other secretary was there, chomping on a sandwich. She mumbled loudly and pointed at tiny Sabrina, causing the first secretary to come over. The girl dashed under the desk again, but this time the secretary got down on her hands and knees and pointed the spray can at her and pushed the nozzle. Sabrina was sure she was going to soon be covered in a horrible poison and die. But luckily, the nozzle was pointed upward, and the chemical death landed all over the desk. This one's fast, the first secretary scowled. Don't send it running over here, the second secretary cried. Those things give me the heebie-jeebies. The first secretary raced around the desk just as Sabrina darted behind a file cabinet. Where did it go? The second secretary had gone back to enjoying her sandwich and mumbled I don't know, to her co-worker. I know where the filthy thing went, the first secretary cried. Suddenly, Sabrina's safe hiding place began to rock back and forth. The file cabinet moved several inches before it stopped. It's heavy. I'm not a cockroach, she shouted, but she knew the woman couldn't hear her. The stream of poison came showering in from one side of the cabinet. Sabrina darted out of the way, but the secretary seemed to anticipate her escape route and was waiting for her on the other side. The girl looked up to find the nozzle of the can pointed right at her. Now I've got you. But she never got a chance to spray the poison. Sabrina heard the office door open and Mr. Sheepshank say, "Hello, ladies. The commotion is all over." What was it? The secretary asked. It was just a big dog some kids let in. Scared everybody half to death. Most of the kids have already left for home. Principal Hammond told me just told me to let you two go as well. Early dismissal for grown-ups? I love it, the cockroach-obsessed secretary cheered. She quickly forgot about Sabrina and crawled to her feet. Nitro. I'm going home myself, the guidance counselor said. Sabrina couldn't see what was going on, but she could hear the women packing up their things and leaving. Sheepshank followed them out and closed the door. After several minutes, Sabrina realized the entire school was empty. All she had to do now was wait. She walked over to the desk of one of the secretaries and laid down under her big chair. The room was warm and comfy, and before she knew it, she had fallen asleep. Sabrina woke up inside Elvis's nose. Granny and Mr. Canis had used the big dog's excellent sniffer to track the tiny girl down. And when Elvis found her asleep under the chair, he accidentally inhaled her. With her head now covered in dog boogers and mucus, she kicked for freedom. But this only caused the dog to snort deeply. Sabrina rocketed into his nasal cavity, slid down his throat, and was coughed out onto the floor. When Sabrina got to her feet, Granny was already standing next to her, holding out 2 eat-me cakes in her hands. She was as tiny as her granddaughter's, but the anger on her face was as big as the moon. Her round face and button nose were now red with frustration. Sabrina wondered if smoke might blow out of her ears. Granny, you won't believe what I found out. Hoping her news would change the old woman's mood. I agree, Sabrina, Granny snapped. I doubt I'll be believing anything you say for a long time. She handed the girl an eat-me cake and quickly unwrapped hers. She took a big bite and began to grow. Sabrina ate her cake and felt her body sprout up as well. Unfortunately, Elvis's boogers grew at the same rate, and when she reached her normal size, even the Great Dane looked disgusted at the goo that covered her from head to toe. Delphina, who was standing nearby, ran to hug her sister, but halted when she just saw the disgusting mess that covered Sabrina. I'm sorry. I love you, but you're way, way too gross, the little girl said. We got into the boiler room, Sabrina said, still hoping to impress his mother. I know. Puck said. She knows, Puck said sheepishly. She and Wendell leaned against the wall, looking guilty. Why wasn't everyone excited? They had found an important clue to the mystery. I also know you did it by breaking almost every one of my rules. Mira says you have a set of keys for nearly 3 dozen rooms in the Hall of Wonder. I've been making copies, Sabrina said, lowering her eyes to the ground. How sneaky of you, Granny said. I suppose you're proud of yourself. Sabrina knew it was not the right time to brag. You told us that this was our job, she argued. Delphine and I didn't come banging on your door hoping that we'd get chased by giants and evil rabbits. Now that we're actually trying to take on the destiny of ours, you want us to stop. Sneaking around behind my back, defying my request to stay out of the case, stealing and copying my keys, testing out magic and potions in the middle of the night, and dragging your sister into danger, said Granny. Add that to your attitude about the ever-afters, and I just don't see you as much of a help right now. Sabrina's eyes welled with tears, but she refused to cry. She bit her lip hard and squeezed her fist tight. The last thing she would do now was to show the old woman that her words had stung. Dinner time was quite an affair. No one talked, no one made eye contact, and no one smiled. Even Puck, who could usually be counted on to fart during dinner, was oddly quiet. When everyone had eaten, Granny quietly washed the dishes while Puck, Sabrina, and Dolphine stared at one another from across the table. Elvis eyed Sabrina from time to time, but didn't seem to want to go near her after she had been inside his nose. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Granny stopped washing the dishes and rushed to open it. Snow White was standing outside in the cold. The old woman quickly invited her inside. "Thank you so much for coming, Snow," she said as she took off her apron and folded it. "I'm happy to help. Any chance to spend time with my favorite student." "That's me," Dolphine cried as she rushed to the door. "Mr. Canis will be coming with me, and the sheriff is on his way now. The children have eaten, but feel free to rage the refrigerator. Hopefully, we won't be gone long." Just then, a car horn blast came from outside. "That's Hammond," Mr. Canis said as he opened the closet and took out his and Granny's coats. "What's going on?" Sabrina said. "We're going to go and put a stop to what's been going on under the school. While we're gone, Miss White will be looking after you." "You got us a babysitter?" Sabrina cried. "I'm too old for a babysitter." "You're too old," said Puck. "I'm over 4,000 years old. This is an outrage." "I might have thought the same thing this morning," Granny replied as she put on her coat. "We should go," Sabrina screamed. "We've seen the tunnels. We know how to get down into them." There was another knock on the door. When Mr. Canis opened it, Wendell Hamlin stepped inside. "Oh, we've got a guide," Granny said. "The sheriff says we better get going," the boy said, wiping his runny nose on his handkerchief. He looked more sad than excited about this latest detective assignment. "Honey, you don't have to do this. This is your father we're going to arrest." "Maybe I can convince him to stop before anyone else gets hurt," Wendell said. "He's my dad. I have to try." Granny, Mr. Canis, and Wendell looked apologetically at the other children, said their goodbyes, and were soon gone, leaving Sabrina standing by the door with a stunned expression. "Well now," Snow White said uncomfortably, reaching into her handbag and pulling out a board game. "Who wants to play Candyland?" Snow White did her best to keep the kids busy. She set up the board game, but Puck had no patience for it. When he landed on Molasses Swamp and lost a turn, he flew into a rage, flinging the board out the front door and into the yard. Later, after he calmed down, Miss White suggested they play charades. Once again, Puck was a spoiler, acting out the names of tree gnomes and pixies that had lived 300 years ago and insisted they were as famous as any astronaut or president. Eventually, even Snow White gave up and let the children do what they really wanted to do: research. The girls searched the library for titles that might be of help. With half of their final traipsing around in some dark tunnels, Sabrina and Dolphine felt the least they could do was make sure that nothing had been overlooked. Sabrina eventually came across her great-aunt Matilda's pamphlet entitled Rumpelstiltskin, Secret Nature. She could see it was going to be a dry read, so she fell into a chair and started on page 1. Rumpelstiltskin's story was a famous fairy tale. Everyone had heard it, but Sabrina wasn't taking any chances with what she thought she knew. Dad's attitude for fairy tales had left the girls at a disadvantage, and she wanted to know the story inside out. But even she was shocked to see how much misinformation Matilda had collected about the little creature. It looked as if months of work had gone into the analysis of every single nuance of his personality, powers, and action. Her ancestors even had theories on how Rumpelstiltskin spun wheat into gold, where he had come from, and why he tried to trick people out of their children. Okay, we'll start the next one.